All right, beginning turn 2, I laid out the Trinovantes. They have a leader, a chariot unit, which doesn't have a great deal of attack value. Really not much at all. Some decent strength foot units, a couple of 8s, a 6, and a cavalry unit. Fortunately, none of them begin in Camelodunum, because if they did, they would have to participate in the looting. Now, the looting marker, they were looting for 1 turn, and I interpret that to mean that the entire next turn they can't move. Because if this 1 meant that turn that they started looting, they really wouldn't have lost any time. So I think that what happens here is that this group cannot move this turn, because this is the turn immediately following the turn in which they begin to loot. And then likewise over here, these guys have 2 turns. So this turn and in turn 3, they're not going to be able to move. So when I was thinking before about, oops, all those guys fell down. When I was thinking before about whether or not Paulinus was going to be able to catch those guys, he's definitely going to be able to catch them if they've got to sit around here for 2 turns looting. Now, whether or not he chooses to do that, I would imagine it makes sense for him to wipe them out, particularly if he can join up with this large force of legionaries over here. So it's not looking too particularly good for the Ordovices or Decaanli. They're kind of stuck. The Ordovices and Decaanli could try to join forces there at Viraconium to make a larger stack, and maybe Paulinus would think twice before attacking it. I don't know. We do have a disrupted unit, so we're going to roll to try to see if we can undisrupt him. He requires a 7 or less to become undisrupted. He does not get a modifier because he's not stacked with a leader. So we'll roll, and we got a 4, so he gets to flip back over. There's not really much of a detriment to being disrupted other than the fact that you can't attack. You defend normally as you normally would, and there's some rules about whether or not they're allowed to move, which I think we discussed earlier, but you know, you're not any more vulnerable per se other than you're not really being able to move. So looking over here, the next thing to do, obviously, is to go after Verulamium and Londinium, which are garrisoned very lightly, because once we conquer them, we get the Catavellauni, which is definitely the biggest, you know, lowland tribe, anti-Roman tribe in the game for sure. So they're absolutely necessary for any tribal success. They're about to get invaded from 2 directions by the 2nd and the 9th legions, respectively, here and here. So we definitely need the firepower that they have. Now, what's interesting about this is the next few turns, the tribal player is probably going to be spending his time sending his fastest units, which hopefully would be like his cavalry, down into these various areas. And the reason for that is because if you look at like the Cantiaci, which are over here, their activation requirement is rebels controlling Durovernum Conti, which is right here, not very far from London at all. And also the Cantiaci homeland is empty of Roman units. So basically, any kind of a decent force ought to be able to scare off the fleet and this Roman auxiliary unit here, because it's only a 4. And fleets can't even fight. So it seems very unlikely that the Roman player is going to contest that area. Then if you go down a little bit further to the Regnenses, they actually require a couple of other tribes. So let's go to the Atribates. Rebels control Cavella, or Caleva, which is there. And the Romans have lost at least 25 strength points, which so far they've lost 10, so they're well on their way. The Belgae, Romans control Venta Belgarum, BG21, which is here. And the Romans have lost 25 strength points. So these two, you know, 1 or 2 more battles that go anywhere near the tribal player's favor are likely going to be able to bring these guys in, unless the Roman player moves down to garrison those locations. And control really is, I mean, 1 single unit can you know, take control of a location. So it doesn't take much. I mean, a single chariot or a single horse unit heading down that way is going to be all that it probably takes. Once you've got the Atribites and the Belgae, then the Regnenses are happy to come in if the Atribites and the Belgae are active and the rebels control Novio Magnus Regni, which is down here. So basically these four really are going to fall like dominoes pretty quickly unless the Roman player decides to block maybe the Atribites and the Belgae from being able to be activated by garrisoning them. The problem with that approach is then he's not going to really be able to use the second Augusta against the Caravella Uni, and I don't think that the Ninth Hispania is strong enough by itself to demoralize one of these tribes if the tribal player, builds a big stack to fight with. He's probably not going to lose enough strength points, and if he does, as long as he's got a mixed force of several tribes, which he probably can do, he can apportion their losses in such a way to avoid having one of them, end up demoralized. The Dobuni, which are here, kind of right in the middle of where the second Augusta is located, all that needs to happen there is the rebels need to control Kaleva, which is down here in the Atribites' homeland, and Corinium, which is here. So if the second Augusta moves too far south in any force, you may have the Caravella Uni moving in very quickly into the Dobuni homeland, and then encircling Kaleva to the point where it may become untenable for the Roman player. So we'll get the movement going here with this newly activated tribe, which probably means attacking these two Roman centers of Verulamium and Londinium, and see what happens next. I was thinking here about this situation over here. I've got a couple of horse units here, which I'd really rather not have wrapped up in looting Verulamium if I can avoid it. So I figured I would try to force march this 8 strength unit there. They would need to force march to get there, but they'd be at a 4-1 against this defender. So chances are pretty good that they would wipe them out. This is also the first turn after the Trinovantes activate, so any battles they engage in, they have that element of surprise or ambush. So we're going to try the force march. We're going to roll 2 dice and hope that our number is under 8. So we got a 3. So that's good, because now I don't need either one of these horse units, these cavalry units, so they can actually head down toward the Cantiaci homeland to activate them, hopefully sooner than later. So if I move, let's see, the only problem is going through London isn't really going to work, because that would require an overrun. Oh, I've got another guy here. He's a 10. I got to see if he made it on a force march. He's not really needed. Oh, I got a 9, so he made it as well. So the problem is you can't overrun unless you're at a 7-to-1 ratio, which I'm not at here. I'm at a, I don't know what this is, 7's 13, 13 to 3, so I'm at a 4-to-1. So I can't really move those guys through London to get across the river here, the Thames, I guess it is. So they're going to have to stop there. And actually, you can't overrun a location with a city, I think, or with, what do they call that, a Roman center. Anyway, so getting these guys down there, I don't want them in the Londinium tract, because I don't want them to be subject to looting. So I kind of almost just want to sort of set them here, just north of London, not participating in the battle. So regardless of what happens, however long the looting period is around London, on the next turn I can move these guys through, and they would get a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They could make it easily to Dobrivai Canti, which is where they need to go in order to activate the Cantiaci. They can't quite get to kicking the Roman player out of the eastern end of this landmass, though. So unless the Roman leaves voluntarily, they're going to have to spend another turn, bringing this small force here to battle, which I think probably makes sense for the Roman. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for him to abandon that voluntarily and let the Cantiaci raise a turn earlier, I don't think. So that's what they did there. Up over here, we've got these guys looting. I thought about the Iceni under Boudica and some of these other Trinovantes. You've got a leader here, a chariot unit, and a very decently strong 8-2 unit over here. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to move them south because that's not where the action's going to be. The action's going to be around this general vicinity here where you've got the 9th Legion coming in from the north. So I think it's actually best to set up somewhere around the river line here. Although rivers don't really do a whole heck of a lot for a defender, there is a negative modifier to attackers if the entire force or a majority of the force is attacking across a river. It's a -1, which is better than nothing. So probably it makes sense for the Iceni player, the tribal player, to sort of garrison, you know, either here or here. This is probably asking for it because you can't get too much force there, but that's probably doable. So the best thing to do here from Boudica's perspective is probably to move some units there. These guys, they're all 2s, so 1, 2, 3. They could try to force march. They're 11, 10, and 12, so the one guy wouldn't even have to, well, I guess he would have to roll because you might get an equals. So let's try rolling for force march for them. We'll do the 12 first. He's safe. We'll do the 10 next. Ooh, he rolled a 10, so he gets disrupted, but he makes it because it was an equal to his morale. And then we do the 11. He rolled an 11. So these two got disrupted, but they made it. Chances are very good. In fact, almost, I guess it's guaranteed that they will undisrupt on the next turn because they'll be stacked with a leader. And it doesn't really hurt the tribal player at all because they defend at their full, you know, value. So that doesn't really hurt them at all to be disrupted. Over here, you got this Trinovante's leader and a chariot, and then another cavalry unit here, and these guys, of course, still can't go anywhere because they're looting. So I'll move them next. Cavalry, you know, probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He gets there with them as well. These guys, the leader's 5, the chariot's 4, the footmen are just 8, or I mean 2. 1, 2, coming down this way is kind of coming around. I think 1, 2, 3, 4. We probably won't bother to force march. And 1, 2 gets us to the road. So on our next turn, we ought to be able to make it over there. So we're beginning to set up. Oh, and then we got these guys. 1, 2 with them. So we're beginning to. Oh, they can't stack together because they're different tribes. 1, 2 from behind. We're beginning to get, you know, a defensive point established here. There will be a bunch more units here once we resolve these battles. So let's do that now. We have 4-1 on the Trinovantes. We do have to roll for tribal unreliability. It's going to be a 1 to tribal disadvantage, but we have a, let's see, a 2 to tribal ambush because this is the first turn the Trinovantes are active. So we're at a +1 altogether at exactly 4-1 odds. So, oh boy, another 1. So we roll a 1, which changes to a 2, and the defender loses 25% of his force. The attacker loses 10%. This is where that rule is going to actually come in very handy because we only have 1 counter and it's below a 10. So a victorious unit can ignore a 10% loss result in that particular case, and the defenders are going to be eliminated. So Verulamium falls, and now we have to determine how long we're going to loot. And we're going to loot for 2 game turns. So that's not that great, but at least it's only 1 unit. So we'll stick him on there. I need to turn these other ones, take these other ones off, put that one to looted, so we know on their next turn they can move, and then flip this one around to a 1. They still can't move. I really should have moved these guys first before I did these battles, but I'll do that when I'm done. Over here, we have, what did I say? I think I said a 4-1, right? Because it's the defenders have 3, and we're at 13. Yeah, so we're at 4-1. Rolling for tribal unreliability, we get a 2, which is 1 to tribal disadvantage. And they have a +2 because they're Trinovantes. So again, it's a +1 altogether. We roll in the 4 to 1 odds. We get another 1. This one's not as good because the defender has to only lose 25%. So he can take his 1 strength defending unit and lose it. The 2 strength unit then simply has to retreat 2 hexes, which he can move down to here. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. These town defenders can't move. I think only if Paulinus is stacked with them. So once he sort of retreats down the road, there's really nothing he can do for the rest of the game unless Paulinus happens to come across him. So maybe it makes sense to retreat into the Cantiaki homeland, because there at least he can stop those chariots and force them to waste a turn fighting him here in Novio Magus Canti. So then these guys got to lose 10%. So the 3 is the one they'll take of the 3 counters. The 3 strength one is the one they'll have to take there, but that's not particularly great for them. So Trinovantes have a losses of 3, and their demoralization level is 16, so they're about a quarter of the way there. And now, of course, London has fallen, so we roll for looting. And we got a 5, which is also 2 game turns. So we grab a looting marker, put it on a 2. So that's not great either, but again, we are going to bring in the Catavaloni on the next turn because their activation requirement has been met, which is these 2 locations having fallen. So I'll move the these guys over here, the Decaangli and Ordovices, to some extent, and then we'll start on the Roman player's turn. All right, I was looking at something here, and I just noticed that the 9th Legion is actually within striking distance of this force containing Boudica. They are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tracks away. And following a what do they call it? A primary road. If their entire movement is along a primary road, Roman legionary units get +2 to movement. Plus, then they can force march an additional tract, and that would get all these 2 speed units there. They're all guaranteed to make the force march because this legion commander has a morale factor of 5, and all of the units have decent enough morale that that's pretty much a guaranteed success on the morale check for the force march. So the only one I don't think that the Legionnaire commander can help is this horse unit back here, which they would need because they'll end up with like 49 strength points, which is a lot. The defenders have 34, 35. The problem is that's not 3 to 2. So we're going to be on the 1 to 1 odds track. And this guy will have to make it, because if he doesn't, I did this sort of back of the napkin calculation of what the combat die roll modifiers are. They're actually even, but if this guy doesn't make it, the defenders are actually going to have more horse units, and that will give them a +1, which would make this attack pretty risky. But the chance to really break the back of the Iceni is probably worth it. I mean, they could get a 50% loss ratio for the tribal player if everything goes right. And the thing of it is, like, it's not going to get any better in the next turn because, yeah, you'll have the 2nd Legion coming into the picture, but you're going to have, you know, I don't know, how many strength points? 105 strength points that Catavaloni have. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to wait. And the tribal player has kind of put himself in a position here. From the tribal player's perspective, it sure would be nice to have this. Well, that's just a chariot unit. There's not much there. So I think the Roman player is going to make a move and try to really put the hurt on the tribal player here. Over here, I managed to get most of the Highland tribes into Viricanium, so they're now participating in the looting. And what that means is that stack is probably, I mean, Paulinus is probably going to have to attack it. He's got a pretty good combat modifier. so it should present a pretty decent die roll modifier in his favor. It's going to take him a turn to get there, but he's probably going to have to attack there because that's a crossroads that he really needs to have to be able to move his units eastward. There's no good roadway if he doesn't go through that town. I mean, he'd have to follow these tracks all the way up through here, which is really not the way he wants to be going. So things are going to be shaping up for a big battle here at Viraconium as well. In this particular case, I don't think the tribal player cares that much because he'd love to inflict some casualties, and those Highland tribes don't count for much in terms of victory for him. They really don't count for anything. So there's no reason not to use them, you know, to put some damage on the Legion. But I'm going to go ahead and make a move here, and I think we're going to have a big battle right around Duralipans. I don't know, whatever. All right, so I pulled these units off just to do the calculation, make the calculation easier. This is actually taking place at Durovigutum. There. So I checked out, we got, basically there's 49 base strength points for the attacker. There's 36 base strength points for the defender. If you use the charge bonus for both, which I don't see why they wouldn't, you've got 53 versus 38. Then you get to the modifiers. Attacking across the rivers, -1. The leader resolves to -1 because Boudica has a better leader rating, 1 better than the Legion commander. There are basically 8 cohorts worth of Roman discipline. The first cohort in every Legion counts as 2 for that. So you've got 4 there, essentially, and 4 there. So that's 2 units worth of Roman discipline, so that's worth a +2. And I rolled on tribal unreliability and got a 1 to tribal disadvantage, so that's a +1. So basically we're going to roll a single die on the 1-to-1 odds at a +1 to the die roll. We roll a 2, which resolves to a 3, which causes each force to lose 25%. Now, because of that, the attacker is going to be considered to have lost the battle and will have to retreat. But first we got to take our losses. Losses, because both sides charged, well, yeah, I guess both sides would use their charge, are going to have to be taken from the charging units first. So if we're looking, and their charge strength does not count for that, only their basic strength counts toward the losses. So in the case of the Roman player, we need to lose 12, I guess 13 strength points. Yeah. In the case of the tribal player, we would need to lose, let's see, 9 strength points. So for the tribal player, losing the chariot unit and the cavalry is 9. So that would, and that's, he has to lose those because they charged in the battle. So he's done there. Over here, what did I say? 13. 13. Losing the 2 horse units is 10, and they'll have to lose a cohort at 5 to make up the difference. That's a lot of glare there. Sorry about that. Doesn't really matter which cohort they lose as long as it's not the 1st or 2nd, which are worth more. So we'll just have the 7th cohort go down in flames, and that will cause the Romans to have to retreat 2 hexes from the battle hex. So they'll probably end up at Dobrivai Katu, which is two tracks away. So I'll go ahead and move them there now.